Cincinnati at NC State, ESPN Thursday night. Marco, what should bettors be looking at?
The big question here is there's an early line move in this game. Is the early line move correct? I don't think it is, but this is going against what I thought public perception would be. Last week, the big thing involving the ACC.
All right, so slow down. What was the line move?
This game opened up originally Cincinnati -2.5, and it's crossed over to NC State -2. Now last week, why that's so surprising to me is the ACC last week got embarrassed across the board. Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech, Miami of Florida, Florida State, they all lost bad ball games. I mean, Georgia Tech lost to Kansas, which is a game we'll talk about later.
Okay, so let's think about this. I totally understand if you get 5 or 6 or 7 weeks in the season, and let's say the Big Ten, this has been the case, and it's 5, 6, 7 weeks in the season, and Ohio State's undefeated, let's say, and the rest of the Big Ten stinks. And amongst those 7 games, Ohio State played 4 Big Ten games. Now you could say the quality of the conference is going to speak to Ohio State's true level. But the very fact that most games so far, if not all of them, have been out of conference for the ACC and the other conferences, how does the fact that the rest of the ACC stink affect NC State?
Well, the perception is that the ACC is weak. That's what the public perception is going to be.
But that would be. But if NC State hasn't played those teams on their schedule, how? I mean, really, Ohio State has as much connection to those ACC teams or USC as NC State. So my question is, what I think you're saying is, the perception might be, oh, the ACC stinks, but if you dig a little bit deeper, it doesn't matter. The question right now is, how good's NC State?
Correct. And ironically, NC State is one of the only ACC teams that actually won out of conference last week. But they played Central Florida. So, it's difference of conference, but it was also a very misleading final score. NC State won 28-21 over Central Florida, but they benefited from 5 turnovers in that game. NC State only completed 10 passes in the game for 105 yards. So I really think that NC State coming into this game is not that good of a ball club, and I think the public is overreacting to Cincinnati's first loss. It's the only time they saw Cincy play, and that was Labor Day weekend when they went out to Fresno State. They went out and jumped out 14-0 at Fresno State, and then they didn't do anything the rest of the game, losing 28-14. A lot of people are going to expect that program to go into a decline since Kelly moved on and went to Notre Dame.
And I think you make a good point, is the fact that you got a new coach. Each game early is going to be taken a lot more seriously and be more meaningful, thus a poor performance, potentially an overreaction. Now, as we always talk about, early line moves are sharp moves, but then there's really 2 possibilities. They're setting up for a buyback, or they're taking a legitimate position. And usually if they're setting up for a buyback, they're getting ahead of a move. I'd be hard-pressed to think they thought that Cincinnati or NC State, in this case, was going to get a ton of action. I'm thinking it's a legitimate move. Now, is it right? We'll see. But my feeling is it's a legitimate move.
It is. Does appear to be a legitimate move, but it's one that I'm going to go against. And in this game, I actually think Cincinnati, they got what I like to call a buffer game in them last week. Granted, it was only Indiana State, but they won 40-7, so it got them into this situation where, you got back into the winner's circle, you get a little bit of confidence. Even though it's a lower echelon team, it still makes you feel good when you win. And I think going into this game on Thursday night that they've got the more diversified offense than NC State. There's no way NC State can win this game only completing 10 passes like they did last week.
Okay, couple points, and then you're going to give a projection. One is, this is a great example of where trends can be deceiving. Cincinnati has lost 7 straight ATS. So you might say, okay, they're overrated. But you have a new coach, and thus, as you've mentioned, 2 games so far this year. So do you really go back to the 5 the end of the year with last year? I wouldn't. But if all you did was glance at some web page with generated trends, you might be misled here.
What I was going to add in here is in most of those games that you're talking about that they lost, Cincinnati was a big favorite. Now they're in
Different
a luck.
situation, different coach. Good point. Number two, and I think this goes against your thoughts on Cincy, though I'm not sure to what degree. Thursday games are a special beast. On one hand, you can have a bye before a Thursday game, or sometimes people play successive Thursday games, so you still have your full week. Other times you can be home last week and home Thursday, even if the game was on Saturday, not so bad. Cincinnati actually falls into almost the worst scenario. They were at home last Saturday, now they're on the road. So short week with travel, big negative. I guess in theory the worst case would be on the road last week, travel on Thursday. I'm not even sure if they schedule them that way. Do you know?
Once in a blue moon it'll happen, but they try to avoid that.
So I do think situationally it's a Cincinnati negative. Marco, what's your projection on the game?
Again, because they had such an easy opponent last week, Indiana State, I think that kind of negates it a little bit. It was more or less a scrimmage or a practice against Indiana State. So I don't think it's a negative.
Okay, so projection.
I am going with Cincinnati to win this game, and I'm taking them 27-17 outright.
Underdog outright.
Underdog outright.
Now it's your turn to get involved. Continue the conversation in the comments section with Marco and me, and we'll be back with Kansas at Southern Mississippi.